Stop letting conversations hijack your agenda. Conversation Control delivers 9 lightning, simple frameworks that turn every chat, pitch, and meeting into fast-track wins. Inside, you'll map crystal clear end goals in 90 seconds, seize the frame in 60, trigger oxytocin-level trust with tactical empathy, and steer any dialogue toward decisive, win-win action. If you're chasing 6-figure growth and influence without burnout, this is your on-the-go playbook. Chapter 1. End Goals. Have you ever left a conversation feeling you gained nothing, or worse, feeling like the conversation controlled you rather than the other way around? Far too often, people dive into discussions without a clear destination, blindly hoping things turn out favorably. But hoping isn't a strategy, it's a gamble. Effective communicators never gamble. They enter every interaction with a meticulously mapped end goal, making sure every word they speak serves a predefined purpose. If you're tired of aimless interactions and are ready to gain control, understanding the power of setting clear end goals is your first critical step. Knowing exactly what you want from an interaction isn't merely advantageous, it's essential. Conversations without predetermined goals quickly fall victim to ambiguity, a stealthy enemy that siphons clarity and purpose from any dialogue. Ambiguity places you in a reactive state, constantly trying to decode intentions rather than confidently steering toward outcomes. It heightens cognitive load and emotional uncertainty, transforming what should be an effortless exchange into a draining mental exercise. Clear end goals neutralize ambiguity instantly, equipping you with laser-focused intentionality and significantly reducing stress. Clarity doesn't only save mental bandwidth, it also preserves emotional energy. Think of your emotional energy as finite currency you spend in every conversation. Aimless interactions quickly exhaust your emotional reserves, leaving you depleted and susceptible to making poor decisions under pressure. Conversely, entering a dialogue with a clear vision of your desired outcome drastically reduces emotional friction. It frees you to allocate your emotional resources strategically, maintaining composure and sustaining your persuasive momentum throughout the exchange. Momentum, as subtle as it is powerful, operates on a psychological principle. People gravitate toward coherence and confidence. When you know exactly where you want the conversation to go, your words, tone, and body language naturally align to signal authority and competence. This automatic coherence becomes contagious, subtly compelling others to follow your lead. Like a seasoned captain who plots a course before setting sail, your clear destination ensures each conversational maneuver contributes directly to the final objective. But how do you clearly define these powerful end goals? It begins with outcome mapping, a deceptively simple but highly effective practice that transforms vague intentions into precise, actionable targets. Outcome mapping begins by visualizing success, explicitly defining what constitutes a win for you. Imagine the conversation has concluded, and ask yourself, what specifically did I achieve? The clearer your mental image of this end-state success, the more accurately you can direct the dialogue toward achieving it. Once you've vividly pictured your end-state success, reverse engineer the critical milestones necessary to achieve it. Instead of passively hoping for the best, break down your desired outcome into incremental, manageable checkpoints. This reverse engineering ensures each conversational move is deliberate, purposeful, and logically connected, ensuring smooth navigation even if the interaction veers off course momentarily. Worried about time? Outcome mapping doesn't require lengthy contemplation. With practice, you can perform quick-fire mapping in just 90 seconds. It takes minimal preparation time to yield maximum conversational impact. By investing just a minute and a half, you ensure clarity and intentionality permeate every moment of your interaction, transforming spontaneous exchanges into powerful opportunities. Outcome mapping, powerful as it is, achieves peak effectiveness when paired with the 3-layer objective stack. This structured yet straightforward method ensures your conversational end goals balance personal, relational, and strategic aims. The 3-layer objective stack explicitly aligns your self-interest, the quality of your relationship post-conversation, and how the dialogue advances your broader ambitions. It forces a balanced approach, preventing an overly narrow focus on immediate gains at the expense of future opportunities. The first layer, your personal win, is unapologetically self-interested, yet entirely legitimate. Too often, people compromise their needs for fear of seeming selfish or pushy. The objective stack eradicates this guilt. Clearly articulating your personal win validates your needs, allowing you to advocate effectively for yourself without hesitation or apology. When you enter an interaction confidently clear on your personal needs, you elevate your ability to negotiate, persuade, and ultimately achieve your desired results. The second layer addresses your relational win. Relationships are the bedrock upon which long-term success is built. Ignoring the relational aspect risks short-term gains at the cost of long-term trust and cooperation. By explicitly defining how you want the other party to feel after the conversation, you ensure interactions remain productive and positive. Prioritizing relational outcomes not only strengthens trust, but also cultivates a foundation for future cooperation, critical for sustained success. Finally, the strategic win explicitly connects your immediate interaction to your broader long-term vision. This layer ensures every dialogue, no matter how seemingly insignificant, contributes meaningfully to your overarching goals. Conversations aren't isolated events. They are strategic steps toward long-term success. Without linking interactions to a bigger picture, opportunities are lost, and potential advancements fade into irrelevance. Effective communicators consistently harness tools that streamline goal clarity. Among the simplest yet most potent tools is the 3x3 goal grid, a concise printable template designed to rapidly distill your personal, relational, and strategic aims into clear objectives. This tool is deceptively straightforward yet invaluable, enabling you to articulate layered goals clearly and quickly. Coupled with a succinct destination declaration, a one-liner clarifying your primary objective, these tools anchor your intentionality firmly, guiding your interactions seamlessly from start to finish. Yet even robust methods have pitfalls. One common danger is over-optimizing a single layer of the objective stack, typically the personal or relational layers, at the expense of the others. This imbalance skews interactions, leading to unsatisfactory outcomes or eroded trust. Equally damaging are hidden agendas, often unintentionally buried beneath conscious thought. Hidden agendas sabotage credibility, creating dissonance that the other party subconsciously detects, undermining trust and derailing productive dialogue. Recognizing and consciously managing hidden motivations is crucial to maintaining integrity and effectiveness. Conversely, analysis paralysis emerges when too much time is devoted to outcome mapping. Overthinking stifles spontaneity and responsiveness, transforming a powerful method into a cumbersome barrier. Quickfire mapping circumvents this risk, empowering decisive action while maintaining conversational agility. Like any skill, outcome mapping requires practice to balance careful preparation with responsive flexibility. Regular practice is indispensable for mastering goal clarity. Action drills like the 2-minute triple goal rehearsal embed the practice deeply into your routine. Brief daily exercises, like journaling your goal grids over a week-long sprint, further reinforce the habit of clear and strategic conversational thinking. Reflection drills, such as scoring your interactions afterward against each objective layer, reinforce continuous learning and refinement, steadily building conversational mastery over time. By now, you understand that setting end goals is far from a trivial preparatory step. It's a foundational shift that transforms every dialogue from a random encounter into a strategic interaction, designed to yield precise results while fostering lasting relationships. End goals grant you conversational agency, ensuring every interaction contributes directly to your immediate needs, relational health, and long-term ambitions. Master this skill, and your conversations will cease being passive exchanges and evolve into powerful instruments of deliberate progress. Yet, clarity alone isn't enough. Even with precise goals in mind, conversations can still spiral out of your control if the listener doesn't share your vision or interpret your intentions correctly. Understanding the next critical strategy, how to set frames effectively, ensures every subsequent word you speak resonates exactly as intended. Unlocking the secret to framing doesn't just amplify clarity, it quietly asserts your leadership, guiding the interaction effortlessly from the very first moment. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to Grow to the Top and activate notifications to receive more self-improvement tips that will supercharge your growth. And make sure to give this video a thumbs up and share it with your friends. It really helps the channel grow. Thank you for your support. Chapter 2, Set Frames. Why do some people command attention the moment they speak, while others struggle to be heard even when they're making perfect sense? The difference isn't charisma, volume, or even expertise. It's something far more subtle, yet infinitely more powerful. Within the first 60 seconds of any interaction, an invisible battle takes place for something most people don't even realize exists: the frame. Master this hidden element, and you'll discover how to shape not just what people hear, but how they interpret every word that follows. The concept of framing might sound abstract, but its effects are devastatingly concrete. Every conversation operates within a frame, a cognitive lens that determines how information gets processed, prioritized, and remembered. Think of frames as invisible filters that color every subsequent exchange. When you fail to set the frame deliberately, you surrender control to chance, allowing others to impose their interpretation on your words. But when you master the art of framing, you gain the power to guide perception itself. Most people enter conversations reactively, responding to whatever frame emerges naturally from the circumstances. This passive approach leaves them vulnerable to misinterpretation, resistance, and lost opportunities. Effective communicators understand that frames aren't accidents, they're strategic choices. By consciously establishing the frame within the first minute, you claim what researchers call the first mover advantage in perception. This advantage is profound because humans naturally defer to whoever establishes the initial context, especially when that context feels relevant and beneficial. The mechanics behind framing operate at a neurological level. When someone encounters new information, their brain immediately searches for existing mental categories to process and store it. The frame you establish becomes the filing system for everything that follows. If you frame a discussion as a collaborative problem-solving session, resistance drops and cooperation increases. Frame the same conversation as a negotiation, and defensive barriers rise instantly. The content remains identical, but the cognitive filter transforms how that content gets received and acted upon. This cognitive filtering happens automatically and unconsciously, which makes framing both powerful and dangerous. People don't consciously choose their interpretive lens. They inherit it from whoever sets the frame most convincingly. This is why the first 60 seconds of any interaction carry disproportionate weight. During this critical window, minds are most receptive to contextual cues. Miss this opportunity, and you'll spend the rest of the conversation fighting against a frame that works against your objectives. Designing an effective frame begins with identifying shared stakes, the mutual benefits that make the conversation worthwhile for everyone involved. Shared stakes transform potential adversaries into collaborators by highlighting common ground before differences emerge. When people understand how they benefit from engaging fully, resistance dissolves and attention sharpens. The key is making these stakes explicit rather than assuming others will recognize them independently. Emotional tone plays an equally crucial role in frame design. The same conversation can be framed with urgency to drive immediate action or with collaborative warmth to build long-term relationships. Neither approach is inherently superior. Effectiveness depends on matching tone to context and objectives. Urgent frames work well when time pressure is genuine and action is needed quickly. Collaborative frames excel when building consensus and maintaining relationships matter more than speed. However, certain frame types consistently backfire. Negative frames that emphasize problems without solutions trigger defensive responses. Scarcity frames that artificially manufacture urgency breed suspicion and resentment. Fear-based frames might generate short-term compliance but destroy long-term trust. Effective frames focus on opportunity, possibility, and mutual benefit, while acknowledging challenges honestly without dwelling on them unnecessarily. The most powerful framing technique combines context with transparency, openly declaring your intentions while explaining why the conversation matters. This approach, known as agenda transparency, seems counterintuitive to people who believe strategic communication requires concealing objectives. In reality, transparency creates credibility, and credibility grants influence. When you honestly share your goals and reasoning, people feel respected rather than manipulated, dramatically increasing their willingness to engage constructively. Stanford research demonstrates this transparency advantage clearly. Presenters who prefaced their information with relevant statements were judged 23% more credible than those who launched directly into content. This credibility boost translated into higher acceptance rates and better outcomes. The mechanism is simple. When people understand why information matters to them personally, they listen more actively and retain more effectively. But transparency requires calibration. Share too little, and you appear secretive or manipulative. Share too much, and you overwhelm people with unnecessary detail or appear desperate for approval. The optimal approach reveals enough to establish credibility and relevance without overwhelming or appearing needy. This balance point, the Goldilocks zone of transparency, varies by context but generally includes your primary objective, the mutual benefit, and rough time expectations. Pre-framing time and scope limits prevents conversations from expanding beyond useful boundaries. When people know how long something will take and what ground you plan to cover, they can engage more fully without worrying about hidden agendas or endless discussions. Finnish Communication Lab studies found that transparent agendas reduced average meeting length by 18%, while simultaneously raising satisfaction scores. Participants appreciated knowing what to expect and felt more comfortable contributing when boundaries were clear. The actual delivery of your frame matters as much as its content. A 15-word scene-setter formula provides structure without rigidity. State the topic, explain the relevance, and preview the approach. This formula ensures you cover essential elements without overwhelming listeners with excessive detail. Voice inflection and body alignment reinforce your frame through nonverbal channels. Confident posture and clear articulation signal authority, while open gestures and appropriate eye contact convey respect and inclusion. Consent checkpoint questions further strengthen your frame by inviting participation rather than imposing direction. Simple phrases like, "Does this make sense as a starting point?" or "Are you comfortable with this approach?" transform monologue into dialogue while confirming buy-in. These checkpoints feel collaborative rather than controlling, increasing engagement while maintaining your leadership of the interaction. Even well-designed frames can encounter obstacles. Oversharing your agenda often signals insecurity or neediness, undermining the credibility you're trying to build. When you explain too much or justify too extensively, people sense desperation and become suspicious of your motives. Confidence requires restraint. Share enough to establish context without appearing to seek approval or validation. Frame collisions occur when your intended frame conflicts with someone else's expectations or preferences. Recognizing these collisions quickly allows you to realign rather than fight unproductively. Signs of frame collision include confusion, resistance, or questions that seem off-topic. When you detect collision, acknowledge the disconnect explicitly and negotiate a mutually acceptable frame before proceeding. Sometimes you'll realize you forgot to establish a frame only after the conversation has begun. Recovery is possible, but requires finesse. Pause naturally and say something like, "Let me step back and explain why this matters," or "I should have started by sharing my thinking here." Most people appreciate clarity even when it arrives late, and honest course corrections often strengthen rather than weaken your credibility. Regular practice embeds framing skills into your conversational instincts. Creating multiple frame variants for the same interaction builds flexibility and confidence. Role-playing with feedback helps you calibrate transparency levels and refine delivery techniques. Recording and reviewing your actual openings reveals patterns and improvement opportunities that self-reflection alone might miss. The power of framing extends far beyond individual conversations. When you consistently establish clear, beneficial frames, people begin to trust your leadership and seek your guidance. You become known as someone who makes interactions productive and worthwhile. This reputation creates a positive feedback loop where people enter conversations with you already primed for cooperation and engagement. Mastering frames transforms you from a passive participant into an active architect of every interaction. You stop hoping conversations will go well and start ensuring they serve your objectives while respecting others' needs. The frame you set in the first 60 seconds determines whether the next hour unfolds as a struggle or flows as a collaboration. Yet even the most skillfully crafted frame can crumble if you fail to demonstrate the one quality that transforms words into influence. This quality isn't what most people expect. It's not confidence, expertise, or even charisma. It's something more fundamental, something that must be earned moment by moment throughout every exchange. Without mastering this essential element, your carefully constructed frames become hollow shells that people see through instantly. Chapter 3. Deep Listen. What if the secret to controlling conversations had nothing to do with talking and everything to do with a skill most people think they already possess? You've probably been told countless times to be a good listener. But here's what nobody mentions. There's a vast difference between polite listening and the kind of listening that grants you invisible authority over any interaction. The latter is so rare and so powerful that when people experience it, they instinctively want to follow your lead. This isn't about being nice, it's about earning something far more valuable than compliance. Most people confuse hearing with listening and listening with understanding. But there's a fourth level that transcends them all, making someone feel profoundly heard and accurately reflected. This level of engagement triggers something remarkable in human psychology. When people feel truly understood, they don't just appreciate you, they begin to trust your judgment and defer to your guidance. It's as if deep listening creates an invisible debt that people feel compelled to repay through cooperation and openness. The neurochemical reality behind this phenomenon is fascinating. When someone feels genuinely understood, their brain releases oxytocin and dopamine, the same chemicals associated with trust, bonding, and reward. This isn't mere psychology, it's biology. Your ability to make others feel heard literally changes their brain chemistry in ways that make them more receptive to your influence. UC Berkeley's interdisciplinary research confirms this, showing that perceived empathy increases later compliance by approximately 40% in service encounters. But here's where most people go wrong. They think empathy means agreeing or being overly sympathetic. Real empathy, tactical empathy, is about accurate reflection, not emotional absorption. You don't need to feel what they feel. You need to demonstrate that you understand what they feel. This distinction is crucial because it allows you to maintain your objectivity while still providing the psychological satisfaction that comes from being understood. The foundation of tactical empathy rests on a deceptively simple technique called mirroring. When done correctly, mirroring creates an almost magical sense of connection. The key lies in selecting the right 1 to 3 words from what someone just said and repeating them back with a slight upward inflection, as if asking a gentle question. This isn't parroting, it's strategic reflection that encourages the speaker to elaborate while simultaneously demonstrating your attention. The timing of your mirror matters enormously. Too quick, and it feels mechanical. Too slow, and the moment passes. The sweet spot occurs in the natural pause after someone finishes a thought, when they're subconsciously deciding whether to continue or wait for your response. Your mirror fills that pause perfectly, creating a bridge that invites deeper sharing while keeping the focus on them. Vocal matching amplifies the effect. When you mirror their words using a similar tone and pace, you create unconscious rapport. Their brain recognizes the familiar rhythm and interprets it as understanding and acceptance. Harvard Business School research demonstrates this powerfully. Partners who mirrored phrases achieved 64% alignment on perceived listening quality, compared to just 5% when they didn't mirror at all. Beyond mirroring lies an even more sophisticated tool: emotional labeling. While mirroring reflects content, labeling reflects the emotional undertone. When you accurately identify and name what someone is feeling, you provide validation that goes deeper than mere acknowledgement. The key word here is accurately. Assumptive labels that miss the mark can backfire spectacularly, making people feel misunderstood rather than heard. Effective emotional labels use tentative language that allows for correction without creating defensiveness. Phrases like, "It sounds like you're feeling," or "It seems like this situation is," provide space for the other person to confirm, correct, or elaborate. The upward inflection at the end transforms your label into an invitation rather than a declaration, maintaining their autonomy while demonstrating your attentiveness. The real mastery comes in learning to read emotional temperature in real time. Every interaction has an emotional climate that shifts moment by moment. Your ability to detect these shifts and respond appropriately determines whether you can guide the conversation or whether it spirals beyond your control. Think of emotional temperature in 3 simple zones: green for open and receptive, yellow for cautious or conflicted, and red for defensive or agitated. Green zone conversations flow naturally. People are engaged, responsive, and willing to explore ideas. This is your optimal window for advancing your objectives while maintaining rapport. Yellow zone interactions require more careful navigation. The person is still engaged but showing signs of hesitation, confusion, or mild resistance. Red zone conversations demand immediate attention to the emotional climate before any progress becomes possible. Reading these zones requires rapid scanning of both verbal and nonverbal cues. Vocal tone, speaking pace, word choice, posture, facial expressions, and gesture patterns all provide data about emotional state. The skill lies in synthesizing these signals quickly and accurately, then adjusting your approach accordingly. Push too hard in yellow or red zones, and you'll trigger defensive responses that derail your objectives. Once you've demonstrated deep listening through mirroring and labeling, you earn the right to employ the paraphrase pivot. This technique allows you to acknowledge what you've heard while gently steering the conversation toward your objectives. The pivot works because it honors their perspective before introducing yours, creating a bridge rather than a collision between viewpoints. Effective paraphrasing compresses their main points by roughly 10%, demonstrating that you've absorbed the essence without getting lost in details. This compression shows respect for their time while proving your understanding. The pivot portion uses transitional phrases like, "which brings us to," or "that connects to link their concerns with your agenda seamlessly. The paraphrase pivot is particularly powerful because it feels collaborative rather than manipulative. You're not dismissing their perspective or changing the subject abruptly. Instead, you're building on what they've shared while gradually introducing elements that serve your objectives. This approach maintains rapport while asserting gentle leadership over the conversation's direction. However, deep listening techniques can backfire when misapplied. Over-mirroring creates an uncanny valley effect where your responses feel robotic rather than empathetic. The key is variety. Mix mirrors with other responses to maintain natural flow. Similarly, excessive labeling can make you seem like an amateur therapist rather than a skilled communicator. Use labels strategically when emotions are particularly strong or when you need to diffuse tension. Mislabeling emotions is perhaps the most dangerous pitfall. When you incorrectly identify someone's emotional state, you signal that you're not really listening despite your apparent efforts. This creates a worse impression than if you hadn't attempted to label at all. When in doubt, use more tentative language or ask open-ended questions that allow them to clarify their feelings themselves. Sometimes a pivot attempt fails because you've misread the emotional temperature or moved too quickly from listening to steering. When you sense resistance to your pivot, don't force it. Instead, return to deeper listening until you've rebuilt sufficient rapport to try again. The ability to recognize when to bail out of a pivot and return to pure listening is what separates skilled practitioners from those who push too hard and damage relationships. Regular practice transforms these techniques from conscious efforts into unconscious habits. Daily mirror and pivot journaling helps you recognize patterns in your listening effectiveness. Color coding your interactions each evening builds your emotional temperature reading skills. The 5-minute label loop exercise, where you practice identifying emotions in brief conversations, sharpens your accuracy and timing. The compound effect of mastering deep listening extends far beyond individual conversations. When you consistently make people feel heard and understood, you develop a reputation as someone worth talking to. People seek you out for important discussions because they know you'll listen without judgment and respond with insight. This reputation becomes a powerful asset in both professional and personal relationships. Deep listening also creates a psychological phenomenon called the reciprocity principle. When you invest genuine attention in understanding someone, they feel obligated to return that investment by listening to you more carefully when you speak. This reciprocal attention amplifies the impact of everything you say, making your words carry more weight and influence. Perhaps most importantly, deep listening earns you what negotiation experts call the right to steer. Once someone feels truly heard and understood, they become remarkably receptive to your guidance and suggestions. They've experienced your respect for their perspective, which makes them more willing to consider yours. This earned authority is far more powerful than positional authority because it's based on demonstrated value rather than imposed hierarchy. The transformation from passive listener to tactical empathist represents a fundamental shift in how you approach conversations. Instead of waiting for your turn to speak, you actively create conditions that make others more receptive to your influence. You stop hoping people will listen to you and start ensuring they want to listen to you. Yet, even the most skillful listening can become ineffective if you don't know how to maintain momentum once you've earned the right to guide. The next element in conversational control operates like an invisible GPS system, keeping interactions moving toward your objectives while preserving the collaborative atmosphere that deep listening creates. Master this, and you'll discover how to navigate any dialogue with the precision of a seasoned conductor orchestrating a complex symphony. Chapter 4. Steer Loop. Have you ever noticed how some conversations feel like they're going somewhere, while others meander endlessly without purpose? The difference isn't luck or natural talent. It's the presence of an invisible navigation system that most people never learn to operate. While others drift through discussions hoping for favorable outcomes, master communicators employ a subtle yet powerful technique that keeps every interaction moving toward their objectives without anyone feeling manipulated or bulldozed. This technique operates in cycles, like a GPS that constantly recalculates the best route forward. The challenge most people face after mastering deep listening is knowing what to do next. They've learned to make others feel heard and understood, but then they stall. They've earned the right to guide the conversation, but they don't know how to exercise that right without destroying the rapport they've built. This is where many well-intentioned communicators falter. They either become too passive, letting opportunities slip away, or too aggressive, triggering resistance that undoes their careful listening work. The solution lies in understanding that effective conversation guidance isn't a single dramatic move. It's a series of micro-adjustments that happen so naturally the other person barely notices them. Think of it like steering a car. You don't make one giant turn and then drive straight. You make constant small corrections that keep you on course. Conversational steering works the same way, requiring a repeatable process that maintains momentum while preserving partnership. This process operates through what researchers call the lead loop, a 4-step cycle that transforms passive listeners into active navigators. The beauty of this system lies in its rhythm. Every 30 to 60 seconds, you complete one full cycle, gathering fresh information, demonstrating understanding, highlighting mutual benefit, and then gently advancing toward your objective. This regular cycling prevents conversations from stagnating while ensuring you never push too hard or too fast. The first element, listen, might seem redundant after the previous chapter, but here it serves a different purpose. Rather than the deep, sustained listening that earns you credibility, this is targeted data collection. You're listening for specific information that will help you craft your next move. What concerns are emerging? What opportunities are they revealing? What resistance patterns are developing? This focused listening gives you the raw material you need to guide effectively. The empathize step provides swift validation that keeps rapport intact while you transition from listening to leading. This isn't the deep emotional labeling from tactical empathy, it's a quick acknowledgement that shows you're still tracking with them emotionally. A simple, "I can see why that would be concerning," or "that makes complete sense," maintains the connection while signaling that you're ready to move forward together. The third step, align, is where the real magic happens. This is where you explicitly connect their interests with yours, creating a shared win statement that makes your next suggestion feel collaborative rather than self-serving. Alignment statements transform potential adversaries into partners by highlighting the mutual benefits of moving in your preferred direction. When done skillfully, alignment makes your objectives feel like their objectives. Finally, the direct step provides the gentle forward momentum that keeps conversations productive. This isn't about issuing commands or making demands. It's about posing questions or suggestions that naturally advance the dialogue toward your goals while respecting their autonomy. The direction can be as subtle as a clarifying question or as direct as a specific proposal, depending on the context and your relationship with the other person. Bell Labs collaboration research demonstrates the power of this approach. Teams that used listen-align direct patterns finalized decisions 17% faster than those using traditional discussion methods. The structured approach eliminated much of the circular conversation that typically plagues group decision-making while maintaining high levels of participant satisfaction and buy-in. The key to effective alignment lies in spotting genuine moments of mutual gain rather than manufacturing artificial connections. When someone expresses a concern, challenge, or desire, you're looking for the intersection between their need and your objective. Sometimes this intersection is obvious. They want to save time, and your proposal is more efficient. Other times, you need to dig deeper to find the connection. They want to feel valued, and your suggestion gives them more visibility or influence. Crafting alignment statements requires language that feels collaborative rather than manipulative. Phrases like, "What's interesting is that this could help us both," or "The good news is that solving your challenge around X also addresses," create a sense of partnership. The goal is to make your suggestion feel like a natural solution to their expressed needs rather than a separate agenda you're trying to advance. The direction portion of the loop offers several tactical options. Open probes invite exploration without committing to a specific path. What would need to happen for that to work? Closed advances propose specific next steps. Should we start by addressing the budget concerns? The suggest then check method combines both approaches. One option might be to tackle the timeline first. How does that sound to you? Each approach serves different situations. Open probes work well when you need more information or when the other person seems hesitant to commit. Closed advances are effective when you have clear next steps and the person seems ready to move forward. The suggest then check method provides a middle ground that maintains their sense of choice while offering concrete direction. Timing and rhythm are crucial for loop effectiveness. In fast-paced business contexts, 30-second tight loops keep energy high and decisions moving. Each cycle is brief but complete, gathering just enough information to make the next small advancement. For relationship-heavy conversations or sensitive topics, 60-second wide loops allow more space for processing and emotional connection while still maintaining forward momentum. MIT Sloan research on micro-guidance confirms the value of regular cycling. Project groups that employed steering loops every 2 minutes generated 25% more viable ideas than groups using unstructured discussion. The regular rhythm prevented both stagnation and premature closure, creating optimal conditions for creative problem-solving and collaborative decision-making. However, the The lead loop can backfire when misapplied. Alignment statements that lack genuine mutual benefit feel manipulative and trigger suspicion. When you can't find real shared interests, it's better to be honest about your objectives than to manufacture false connections. People can sense artificial alignment, and attempting it damages your credibility more than simply stating your position would. Directive moves that skip consent create resistance even when the suggestion is sound. The key is maintaining the other person's sense of choice and autonomy. Instead of, "we need to do X," try, "what if we explored X as an option?" The content is similar, but the framing preserves their decision-making authority while still advancing your agenda. Loop fatigue occurs when you cycle too mechanically or too frequently. If every 30 seconds you're obviously listening, empathizing, aligning, and directing, the pattern becomes transparent and feels manipulative. The solution is varying your approach while maintaining the underlying structure. Sometimes spend more time in the listening phase. Other times, combine empathy and alignment into a single statement. The goal is natural flow, not robotic execution. Recognition and recovery skills are essential when loops go wrong. If you notice resistance building, return to deeper listening before attempting another cycle. If your alignment feels forced, acknowledge the disconnect honestly. "I'm not sure I'm seeing the connection clearly. Help me understand." If your direction triggers pushback, step back and explore their concerns before proposing alternatives. The compound effect of mastering the lead loop extends beyond individual conversations. When you consistently guide interactions with this balanced approach, people begin to trust your leadership. They know that following your guidance doesn't mean sacrificing their interests or autonomy. This reputation for collaborative leadership becomes a powerful asset in all your relationships. Regular practice embeds the loop rhythm into your conversational instincts. 30-second timer challenges help you internalize the pacing, while role-playing builds your skill in each component. Converting old emails into alignment statements develops your ability to spot mutual benefits quickly. Real-world loop logging, tracking your cycles during actual conversations, reveals patterns and improvement opportunities that theory alone cannot provide. The transformation from passive participant to active navigator represents a fundamental shift in your conversational identity. You stop hoping conversations will reach useful conclusions and start ensuring they do. You move from reacting to circumstances to creating the circumstances that serve your objectives, while respecting others' needs and maintaining strong relationships. Perhaps most importantly, the lead loop creates a sustainable approach to conversational influence. Unlike high-pressure tactics that work once but damage relationships, this method builds trust while advancing objectives. People enjoy conversations with skilled loop practitioners because they feel heard, understood, and valued while also experiencing the satisfaction of productive dialogue. Yet even the most skillful steering can hit roadblocks when you encounter information gaps or hidden resistance. The next element in conversational mastery involves a sophisticated questioning technique that uncovers the insights you need while making the other person feel like the expert rather than the subject of an interrogation. This approach doesn't just gather information, it transforms the very dynamic of who holds knowledge and power in the exchange. Ask smart. What if the most powerful tool for controlling conversations wasn't a statement, but a question? Most people believe that influence comes from having the right answers, but master communicators know something counterintuitive. The person asking the questions controls the conversation, not the person providing the answers. There's a specific type of questioning that doesn't just gather information, it transforms you into the perceived expert while making the other person feel valued and heard. This technique is so subtle that people don't realize they're being guided, yet so effective that it can shift the entire dynamic of any interaction. The secret lies in understanding how questions create what psychologists call the curiosity gap, a mental tension that compels people to seek resolution. When you ask the right question, you create a knowledge vacuum that the other person feels driven to fill. This isn't manipulation, it's a natural human response to incomplete information. The brain craves closure and will work actively to provide answers when presented with well-crafted questions. More importantly, the act of answering makes people feel intelligent and valued, creating positive associations with you as the questioner. But here's where most people go wrong. They ask random questions without strategy, hoping something useful will emerge. Effective questioning follows a deliberate progression that moves from broad exploration to precise targeting. Think of it as an inverted pyramid. You start wide to map the landscape, then systematically narrow your focus until you reach the specific insights that matter most. This progression feels natural to the respondent while giving you complete control over the discovery process. The framework that makes this possible operates on 3 distinct levels, each serving a specific purpose in the information gathering hierarchy. The first level casts a wide net, encouraging broad sharing without pressure or judgment. The second level focuses attention on the areas that matter most, identifying key challenges or opportunities. The third level pinpoints the exact levers that can create change or movement. Together, these levels create a questioning ladder that guides discovery while building rapport and perceived expertise. Explorer questions form the foundation of this system. These broad, open-ended prompts invite comprehensive sharing without imposing any particular direction. What's been on your mind lately? Or how are things evolving in your department? Create space for the other person to share whatever feels most relevant to them. The key is genuine curiosity without agenda. You're mapping their mental landscape to understand their priorities, concerns, and opportunities. The power of explorer questions lies in their non-threatening nature. People can share as much or as little as they want, maintaining complete control over the depth and direction of their response. This autonomy creates psychological safety, encouraging more honest and comprehensive sharing than direct questions would generate. You're not interrogating, you're providing a platform for them to express their thoughts and concerns. University of Illinois research on inquiry depth demonstrates the effectiveness of this approach. Progressive open questions led to a 21% rise in perceived advisor expertise compared to direct questioning methods. The mechanism is fascinating. When you ask thoughtful questions that help people clarify their own thinking, they attribute that clarity to your wisdom rather than their own insights. You become the catalyst for their understanding, which positions you as a valuable resource. Once explorer questions have mapped the broad territory, Zoomer questions narrow the focus to specific areas of interest or concern. Which part of that situation feels most challenging? Or what aspect of this opportunity excites you most? Guide attention to the elements that matter most while maintaining the collaborative tone established in the exploration phase. Zoomer questions feel like natural follow-ups rather than interrogation because they build directly on what the person has already shared. The transition from explorer to Zoomer requires careful attention to verbal and nonverbal cues. When someone's energy shifts, their voice changes, their posture adjusts, or their language becomes more specific, they're signaling areas of particular importance. These moments present perfect opportunities to zoom in with focused questions that explore the emotional or practical significance of what they've revealed. Effective Zoomer questions often incorporate elements from their previous responses, demonstrating that you've been listening actively while guiding them toward greater specificity. You mentioned feeling stuck on the timeline. What makes that particular aspect feel most stubborn? Shows that you've absorbed their concerns while directing attention to actionable details. This approach maintains rapport while systematically gathering the information you need to provide value or advance your objectives. The final level, laser questions, pinpoint the specific levers that can create movement or change. What single resource would eliminate that bottleneck? Or, if you could change one thing about this process, what would have the biggest impact? Focus attention on actionable solutions rather than abstract problems. Laser questions transform general discussions into specific action planning, positioning you as someone who thinks in terms of practical solutions. Harvard's field experiment on curiosity in sales provides compelling evidence for this structured approach. Representatives who used the three-tier questioning ladder closed approximately 18% more deals than those using conventional questioning methods. The structured progression built trust and perceived expertise while uncovering the specific information needed to craft compelling proposals and solutions. The language you use in crafting questions matters enormously. Power verbs like explore, discover, uncover, and identify create forward momentum and suggest collaborative investigation rather than interrogation. Neutral framing avoids triggering defensive responses by presenting questions as opportunities for mutual understanding rather than challenges to their thinking or decisions. One critical pitfall to avoid is the overuse of why questions, which often sound accusatory even when that's not your intention. Why did you choose that approach can feel like criticism, while what led you to that approach invites explanation without judgment. The difference is subtle but significant in terms of emotional response and willingness to share openly. Timing and sequencing are crucial for maintaining the natural flow of discovery. Moving too quickly from explorer to laser questions can feel jarring and manipulative. People need time to process and respond to each level before moving deeper. Reading cues becomes essential. When someone gives short answers or seems uncomfortable, it's time to return to broader questions or provide more context about why you're asking. Sometimes the discovery process stalls despite your best efforts. When this happens, looping back to earlier rungs often reignites the conversation. If a laser question doesn't yield useful information, return to zoomer level to explore adjacent areas. If zoomer questions aren't working, go back to explorer questions to rebuild comfort and momentum. This flexibility prevents conversations from becoming interrogations when people aren't ready to go deeper. Question stacking, asking multiple questions in rapid succession, is a common mistake that overwhelms people and reduces response quality. Each question deserves space for a complete answer before moving to the next level. The goal is depth, not speed. Quality responses require time for reflection and formulation, especially when you're asking people to think about complex or emotionally charged topics. Privacy boundaries vary significantly between individuals and contexts. Some people share openly about personal challenges, while others prefer to keep professional discussions strictly business-focused. Reading these boundaries and respecting them builds trust and encourages sharing within their comfort zone. Pushing too hard against privacy preferences destroys rapport and shuts down productive dialogue. When you hit a dead end, when questions aren't yielding useful information, or when someone becomes uncomfortable, having rescue lines prepared prevents awkward moments. "I'm probably asking too many questions. Let me share what I'm thinking," shifts the dynamic while maintaining momentum. "Help me understand what would be most useful to focus on," returns control to them while keeping the conversation productive. Regular practice with the questioning ladder transforms it from a conscious technique into an intuitive skill. Creating ladder templates for upcoming conversations helps you prepare strategic questions while maintaining flexibility for unexpected directions. The 5-minute question-only challenge, where you practice asking questions without making statements, builds your comfort with sustained inquiry and reveals patterns in your questioning habits. Post-conversation audits help you evaluate your questioning effectiveness. Did you gather the information you needed? Did the other person seem comfortable throughout the process? Did you successfully progress from broad to specific without triggering resistance? This reflection builds pattern recognition that improves your real-time questioning decisions. The transformation that occurs when you master strategic questioning extends far beyond information gathering. People begin to seek you out for important conversations because they know you'll help them think through complex issues. Your questions become valuable in themselves, providing clarity and insight that people appreciate regardless of whether you have immediate solutions to offer. Perhaps most importantly, skilled questioning positions you as a trusted advisor rather than just another person with opinions. When you consistently ask questions that help people understand their own situations more clearly, you become associated with insight and wisdom. This reputation creates opportunities and influence that direct persuasion could never achieve. Yet, even the most skillful questions can encounter resistance when people feel defensive or threatened by your inquiry. The next element in conversational mastery involves a sophisticated method for transforming opposition into collaboration, turning the very resistance that derails most conversations into the raw material for breakthrough solutions. This approach doesn't avoid conflict, it alchemizes it into something far more valuable. Chapter 6, Reframe. What if the moment someone says no or pushes back against your idea isn't the end of the conversation, but actually the beginning of the most productive part? Most people treat objections like roadblocks, obstacles to overcome, or battles to win. But master communicators see something entirely different when resistance emerges. They see raw material. They see an invitation. They see the exact information they need to transform opposition into collaboration. The secret lies not in fighting the pushback, but in a counterintuitive approach that makes resistance work for you rather than against you. The conventional response to objections follows a predictable pattern: defend, justify, and convince. Someone raises a concern, and immediately we feel compelled to explain why they're wrong or why their concern isn't valid. This instinctive reaction triggers what psychologists call the backfire effect. The harder you push against someone's position, the more entrenched they become in defending it. What feels like logical persuasion actually strengthens their resistance while damaging the relationship you've worked to build. Understanding the anatomy of pushback reveals why traditional approaches fail so consistently. Every objection operates on two levels simultaneously: the surface content and the underlying emotional driver. The surface objection is what people actually say: "It's too expensive," "We don't have time," or "I need to think about it." But beneath these rational-sounding concerns lie deeper emotional needs: the need to feel heard, respected, and in control of their decisions. When you respond only to the surface objection, you miss the emotional component entirely. You might provide compelling logical arguments about value or timing, but the person still feels unheard and pressured. Their emotional brain remains activated, making rational consideration nearly impossible. This is why perfectly logical responses often fail to change minds. They address the wrong level of the objection. The solution requires a fundamental shift in how you perceive and respond to resistance. Instead of seeing objections as a tax on your position, view them as valuable information about what matters most to the other person. Their pushback reveals their priorities, concerns, and decision-making criteria. This information is gold. It tells you exactly what you need to address to move forward together. The bridge and build method transforms this insight into a practical framework. Rather than fighting resistance, you first build a bridge to their perspective, then construct your response on that shared foundation. The bridge validates their concern as legitimate and understandable. The build portion adds your perspective in a way that feels collaborative rather than combative. The bridge phase requires explicit acknowledgement that goes beyond superficial agreement. "You're absolutely right to be concerned about the timeline" differs dramatically from "I understand your concern, but..." The first statement validates their judgment and positions their objection as reasonable. The second statement pays lip service to understanding while immediately dismissing their concern. The difference in emotional impact is profound. MIT's Negotiation Journal research demonstrates this effect quantitatively. Acknowledgement-first reframes reduce defensive language by approximately 32% compared to direct rebuttals. When people feel their concerns are genuinely understood and respected, their defensive barriers lower, creating space for productive dialogue. The acknowledgement doesn't require you to agree with their conclusion, only to validate that their concern makes sense from their perspective. The linking phrase that connects bridge to build determines whether your response feels collaborative or manipulative. And that's exactly why creates logical flow from their concern to your solution. which is why I think maintains the collaborative tone while introducing your perspective. These phrases feel natural and respectful, unlike but or however, which signal disagreement and trigger defensive responses. London Business School simulations reveal the power of this approach. Bridge and build pairs reached integrative agreements 27% faster than those using direct rebuttal methods. The structured acknowledgement created psychological safety that allowed both parties to explore creative solutions rather than defending fixed positions. The method transformed adversarial negotiations into collaborative problem-solving sessions. The build portion of your response must address both the logical and emotional components of their objection. If someone says, "It's too expensive," they're expressing both a rational concern about cost and an emotional need to feel they're making wise financial decisions. Your build response might reframe cost as investment while acknowledging their fiscal responsibility. And because you're thinking carefully about resource allocation, it makes sense to look at this as an investment in long-term efficiency rather than just an immediate expense. Different types of objections require different reframing approaches. Price objections often mask concerns about value or risk. Reframing cost as investment shifts focus from expense to return, addressing the underlying value question. Timing objections frequently reflect priority concerns rather than genuine scheduling conflicts. Reframing urgency as priority alignment helps people see how your proposal fits their existing goals rather than competing with them. Authority objections, "I need to check with my boss," often signal a need for social safety rather than genuine decision-making constraints. Reframing these as alignment opportunities acknowledges their need to maintain relationships while creating pathways for moving forward. And since you want to make sure everyone's on the same page, what information would help you present this in a way that gets the support you need? The language patterns you use during reframing carry enormous weight. Small word choices create dramatically different emotional responses. Your right to raise that concern feels validating, while "I can see why you might think that" feels condescending. "That's a fair point," acknowledges their reasoning, while "I understand your position" creates distance between their view and objective reality. Replacing but with and transforms the entire dynamic of your response. "I understand your concern, but here's why it's not a problem" creates opposition. "I understand your concern, and here's how we can address it" creates collaboration. The content might be identical, but the emotional impact differs dramatically. "And" suggests addition and building, while "but" suggests contradiction and dismissal. Questions can be even more powerful than statements for reframing objections. "What would need to happen for the timing to work better?" transforms a timing objection into a collaborative planning session. "How could we structure this to address your budget concerns?" turns a price objection into a joint problem-solving opportunity. Questions maintain their autonomy while guiding attention towards solutions rather than problems. However, the bridge and build method can backfire when misapplied. Over-agreeing, validating concerns so thoroughly that you undermine your own position creates confusion about your actual stance. The goal is acknowledgement, not capitulation. You're validating their right to have concerns, not agreeing that their concerns are insurmountable obstacles. False bridges feel manipulative because they lack genuine understanding or respect for the other person's perspective. "I can see why you'd think that, but you're missing the bigger picture" isn't a bridge, it's a disguised attack. Authentic bridges require genuine empathy and respect for their reasoning, even when you disagree with their conclusions. Some objections reveal fundamental misalignments that can't be bridged through reframing alone. When someone's core values or non-negotiable requirements conflict with your proposal, attempting to reframe may feel disrespectful or manipulative. In these situations, acknowledging the misalignment honestly and exploring alternative approaches preserves the relationship while respecting their boundaries. The timing of your reframe matters as much as its content. Jumping immediately into bridge and build mode can feel scripted and insincere. Sometimes people need space to fully express their concerns before they're ready to consider alternatives. Reading their emotional temperature and allowing adequate processing time prevents your reframe from feeling rushed or dismissive. Regular practice with reframing transforms it from a conscious technique into an intuitive response. Creating objection scripts for common pushbacks in your field builds confidence and fluency. The yes and rewriting exercise, converting old emails or conversations from but language to and language, reveals how small changes create dramatically different tones. Live role-playing with time constraints builds your ability to reframe under pressure. The 90-second reframe sprint forces you to bridge and build quickly while maintaining authenticity and respect. This practice develops the mental agility needed for real-time objection handling in high-stakes conversations. The compound effect of mastering reframing extends far beyond individual objections. When you consistently transform resistance into collaboration, people begin to trust your ability to handle their concerns respectfully. They become more willing to share objections early rather than harboring them silently, creating opportunities for proactive problem solving. Perhaps most importantly, skilled reframing changes how you perceive conflict and resistance. Instead of dreading objections, you begin to welcome them as opportunities for deeper understanding and creative solutions. Pushback becomes valuable feedback that helps you craft more compelling and relevant proposals. The transformation from defensive responder to collaborative reframer represents a fundamental shift in your relationship with resistance. You stop seeing objections as threats to overcome and start seeing them as information to incorporate. This shift not only improves your success rate, but also strengthens relationships by demonstrating respect for others' perspectives and concerns. Yet, even the most skillful reframing can fall flat if delivered at the wrong pace or with the wrong energy. The next element in conversational mastery involves a subtle but powerful technique that most people never consciously consider, yet it influences every interaction they have. Master this invisible force, and you'll discover how to create exactly the right conditions for any message to land with maximum impact. Chapter 7, Tempo Tune. Have you ever noticed how some speakers can make you hang on their every word, while others lose your attention even when discussing fascinating topics? The difference isn't content, charisma, or even expertise. It's something far more subtle, yet infinitely more powerful. It's an invisible conductor's baton that orchestrates the rhythm of every interaction, determining whether your message energizes or exhausts, whether it builds tension or releases it, whether it commands attention or fades into background noise. Master this hidden element, and you'll discover how to create exactly the right conditions for any message to land with maximum impact. Most people speak at whatever pace feels natural to them in the moment, completely unaware that their tempo is either working for or against their objectives. They rush through important points, drag through transitions, and fill every pause with unnecessary words, never realizing they're sabotaging their own influence. But tempo isn't just about speaking speed. It's about creating the optimal cognitive environment for your listener to receive, process, and act on your message. The science behind tempo's impact operates at a neurological level. When someone speaks too quickly, they overwhelm the listener's processing capacity, triggering stress responses that shut down higher-order thinking. When they speak too slowly, they understimulate attention systems, allowing minds to wander toward more engaging stimuli. The optimal tempo creates what researchers call the cognitive sweet spot, fast enough to maintain engagement, not slow enough to allow comprehension, with strategic variations that emphasize key points and create emotional resonance. University of Michigan research reveals the power of strategic pacing. 2-second pauses after key points improved listener recall by approximately 22% compared to continuous speech. The pause creates a mental bookmark, allowing the brain to process and store important information before moving on. Without these processing breaks, even brilliant insights get lost in the stream of continuous information. But tempo mastery goes beyond simple speed control. It involves understanding how rhythm creates rapport, and how strategic shifts in pace can guide emotional states. When you match someone's natural speaking rhythm, you trigger mirror neuron responses that create unconscious connection. Their brain recognizes the familiar pattern and interprets it as understanding and alignment. This rapport-building effect happens below conscious awareness, creating positive feelings towards you that they can't quite explain. The foundation of tempo mastery lies in pace calibration, the ability to quickly assess and match someone's natural communication rhythm. This involves more than just speaking speed. Vocal volume, pitch variation, and even breathing patterns contribute to someone's communication signature. When you calibrate effectively, you create an invisible bridge of familiarity that makes your subsequent messages more welcome and persuasive. Calibration begins with acute observation during the first few minutes of any interaction. How quickly do they speak during casual conversation versus important points? Do they use long pauses for emphasis or short staccato bursts for energy? What's their default volume level, and how does it change when they're excited or concerned? These patterns reveal their natural communication preferences and provide the baseline for your calibration. Nonverbal rhythm alignment amplifies the calibration effect. If someone gestures slowly and deliberately, matching that pace with your own movements creates deeper rapport than vocal matching alone. If they lean forward when making important points, mirroring that physical emphasis reinforces the connection. The goal isn't mimicry, it's harmonization. You're creating a synchronized communication dance that feels natural and comfortable to both parties. Once you've established rapport through calibration, you gain the ability to lead rather than just follow. The tempo reset maneuver allows you to intentionally shift the pace to create specific effects. Speed up to generate energy and urgency. Slow down to signal importance and gravity. Insert strategic pauses to create reflection and emphasis. These shifts feel natural because you've already established rhythmic rapport, making your tempo changes feel like a natural evolution rather than an abrupt disruption. Speeding up serves multiple strategic purposes. It can inject energy into flagging conversations, create momentum toward decisions, and generate excitement about possibilities. When you gradually increase pace while discussing benefits or opportunities, you create a sense of building momentum that makes action feel natural and necessary. The key is gradual acceleration. Sudden speed increases feel jarring and can trigger resistance. Slowing down signals gravity and importance in ways that explicit statements cannot match. When you deliberately reduce your pace while delivering key messages, you create what researchers call temporal emphasis. The slower rhythm forces attention and suggests that what you're saying deserves careful consideration. Journal of Language and Social Psychology research found that slower speech during difficult messages reduced perceived hostility by 17%, making challenging content more acceptable. Strategic silence represents the most powerful tempo tool, yet it's the one most people fear to use. Two-beat pauses create space for reflection and processing. They also generate what psychologists call productive tension, a mild discomfort that compels response. When you pause strategically after asking important questions or making key points, you create an invisible prompt that encourages deeper thinking and more thoughtful responses. The types of silence you employ determine their effect. Reflective silence follows statements or questions that require processing time. You've shared something important, and the pause allows it to sink in fully. Invitational silence creates space for the other person to contribute, especially after you've asked a question or made a point that deserves response. The key is matching silence type to context and objective. Managing the perception of awkwardness requires confidence and purpose. Most people fear silence because they interpret it as failure or discomfort. But when you use pauses intentionally and maintain composed body language during them, others interpret the silence as thoughtful consideration rather than awkward hesitation. Your comfort with silence signals confidence and control, making others more likely to respect and respond to it. However, tempo techniques can backfire when misapplied. Over-mirroring creates monotony that feels robotic rather than rapport-building. If you match someone's pace too precisely for too long, the interaction loses natural variation and becomes predictable. The solution is calibration, followed by subtle leadership. Match their rhythm to build connection, then introduce gentle variations to maintain interest and guide the interaction. Pausing too long destroys momentum and can make you appear uncertain or manipulative. The optimal pause length varies by context, but generally ranges from 1 to 3 seconds for most situations. Longer pauses work for very serious or emotional moments, but they should be used sparingly to maintain their impact. When in doubt, err on the side of shorter pauses that maintain energy while still providing processing time. Tempo shifts that feel abrupt or artificial trigger resistance and suspicion. The key is gradual transitions that feel organic rather than manipulative. If you need to slow down for emphasis, begin the deceleration a few words before your key point. If you want to speed up for energy, start the acceleration during a transition phrase rather than mid-sentence. These smooth transitions feel natural and maintain the rapport you've built through calibration. Cultural and individual differences affect tempo preferences significantly. Some people naturally speak quickly and prefer high-energy interactions, while others favor deliberate pacing and thoughtful pauses. Reading these preferences accurately and adjusting accordingly demonstrates respect and builds stronger connections than rigid adherence to any single approach. The compound effect of tempo mastery extends far beyond individual conversations. When you consistently create optimal communication environments through strategic pacing, people begin to associate you with productive and engaging interactions. They seek you out for important discussions because they know you'll create the right conditions for meaningful dialogue. Regular practice embeds tempo awareness into your conversational instincts. Mirror then shift exercises with a stopwatch build your ability to calibrate quickly and lead smoothly. The silence countdown drill, practicing pauses of specific lengths, develops comfort with strategic quiet moments. Daily tempo logging helps you recognize patterns in your natural pacing and identify opportunities for improvement. Perhaps most importantly, tempo mastery changes how you experience conversations. Instead of feeling rushed or pressured by fast-paced interactions, you learn to regulate the rhythm to serve your objectives. Instead of feeling bored by slow conversations, you discover how to inject appropriate energy while respecting others' natural pace. You become a conductor rather than just another musician in the conversational orchestra. The transformation from tempo victim to tempo master represents a fundamental shift in your communication power. You stop being at the mercy of whatever pace emerges naturally and start creating the optimal conditions for your messages to be received, understood, and acted upon. This control over the invisible rhythm of interaction gives you influence that operates below conscious awareness, making your guidance feel natural and welcome. Yet even perfect tempo can fail to achieve your objectives if people can't clearly see the path forward. The next element in conversational mastery involves a psychological principle so powerful that it can make your preferred option appear obviously superior without any direct persuasion. This technique doesn't tell people what to choose. It illuminates the choice so clearly that the right decision becomes unmistakable. Chapter 8. Use contrast. Why do some proposals feel irresistibly compelling while others, despite being objectively superior, fail to generate enthusiasm? The answer lies in a fundamental quirk of human psychology that most people never consciously recognize, yet it influences every decision they make. Our brains don't evaluate options in isolation. They judge everything relatively, comparing new information against existing reference points. Master this principle, and you'll discover how to make your preferred option appear obviously superior without any direct persuasion or pressure tactics. The power of relative judgment operates so automatically that we rarely notice its influence. When you see a $200 shirt next to a $50 shirt, the expensive option seems luxurious. But place that same $200 shirt next to a $500 designer piece, and suddenly it feels like a reasonable middle option. The shirt hasn't changed, but your perception of its value shifts dramatically based on the comparison context. This isn't a flaw in human reasoning. It's an efficient mental shortcut that helps us navigate complex decisions quickly. Understanding this principle transforms how you present ideas, proposals, and solutions. Instead of hoping people will recognize the value of your suggestion on its own merits, you can strategically frame the comparison to highlight exactly why your option represents the best choice. This isn't manipulation, it's illumination. You're helping people see the decision landscape more clearly by providing the context they need to make informed choices. The foundation of effective contrast lies in understanding how humans process comparative information. We don't have internal value meters that assign absolute worth to options. Instead, we rely on reference points, anchors that help us gauge relative attractiveness. When you control these reference points, you guide the evaluation process without restricting choice or applying pressure. People still make their own decisions, but they make them within a framework that reveals the true differences between options. Cognitive contrast works by juxtaposing a neutral baseline with an optimized alternative, allowing the benefits of your preferred option to emerge naturally through comparison. The baseline doesn't need to be inferior. It just needs to be different enough to highlight the specific advantages you want to emphasize. When people can see the delta between options clearly, they make decisions based on concrete differences rather than abstract promises. University of Toronto Research Building on Kahneman and Tversky's prospect theory demonstrates this effect powerfully. Paired option framing lifted acceptance of the superior choice by approximately 68%, compared to serial presentation of the same options. When people could compare directly, the advantages became obvious. When options were presented separately, the differences remained hidden, leading to suboptimal decisions. The key to ethical contrast lies in designing an honest baseline that represents a genuine alternative rather than a straw man option created solely to make your preference look better. The baseline should reflect either the status quo, what happens if they don't act, or a legitimate alternative approach. This authenticity ensures that your contrast illuminates real differences rather than manufactured ones. Establishing status quo costs requires honest assessment of what maintaining current conditions actually involves. Most people focus on the obvious costs while overlooking hidden expenses like opportunity costs, inefficiency taxes, and compound problems that worsen over time. When you quantify these often invisible costs, the status quo stops looking like the safe, free option and reveals itself as an active choice with real consequences. The baseline doesn't need to be dramatically inferior to be effective. Sometimes the most powerful contrasts highlight subtle but important differences. If your solution saves 15 minutes per day compared to current methods, that might not sound significant until you frame it as over an hour per week or more than 50 hours per year. The same benefit appears much more substantial when the time frame shifts to reveal cumulative impact. Norwegian marketing trials confirm the power of explicit contrast. When differences between options were spelled out clearly, upsell rates increased by 19% compared to implicit comparisons. People need help seeing the gaps between alternatives, especially when those differences involve long-term benefits or subtle improvements that compound over time. Highlighting your preferred option requires quantifying gains in terms that matter to your audience. Time savings, cost reductions, effort elimination, risk mitigation, and opportunity creation all represent different value currencies. The key is matching your quantification to their priorities. A busy executive cares more about time savings than cost reduction. A budget-conscious manager prioritizes financial impact over convenience features. Visual and verbal contrast cues amplify the comparison effect. Words like versus, compared to, and instead of signal that you're presenting alternatives rather than isolated options. Phrases like path A leads to X while path B delivers Y create clear mental separation between choices. Even simple formatting, presenting options side by side rather than sequentially, helps people process differences more effectively. The Path A versus Path B framework provides structure for verbal contrasts without feeling scripted or manipulative. If we continue with the current approach, we'll we'll likely see gradual improvement over the next year. If we implement the new system, we can achieve those same results in 3 months while building capacity for additional growth. This framing presents both options fairly while highlighting the practical differences between them. Short illustrative scenarios can make abstract differences concrete without relying on specific examples or detailed narratives. Imagine trying to coordinate this project using email chains versus having everything centralized in one platform helps people viscerally understand the operational differences. These brief mental simulations make the contrast tangible rather than theoretical. However, contrast techniques can backfire when misapplied. Over-anchoring, making the baseline artificially poor to inflate your option's appeal, feels manipulative and damages credibility. People sense when comparisons are unfair, even if they can't articulate exactly what feels wrong. Honest contrasts build trust, while dishonest ones destroy it, often permanently. Analysis paralysis emerges when you present too many options or too many comparison dimensions. The human brain handles 2 or 3 alternatives well, but struggles with larger choice sets. Similarly, comparing options across multiple criteria simultaneously overwhelms processing capacity. The solution is limiting both the number of options and the number of comparison points to maintain clarity and decision-making efficiency. Timing affects contrast effectiveness significantly. Presenting the comparison too early, before people understand their situation clearly, wastes the technique's power. Presenting it too late, after they've already formed preferences, triggers resistance to changing their minds. The optimal moment comes after they've acknowledged a need or opportunity, but before they've committed to a specific solution. The language you use to introduce contrasts shapes how people receive them. Let me show you 2 different approaches, feels collaborative and educational. Here's why our solution is better than what you're doing now, feels aggressive and presumptuous. The first approach invites exploration, while the second triggers defensive responses that undermine the comparison's effectiveness. Cultural sensitivity matters when employing contrast techniques. Some cultures prefer indirect communication that allows people to draw their own conclusions, while others appreciate direct comparison and explicit recommendation. Reading your audience and adjusting your approach accordingly ensures that your contrast enhances rather than hinders communication effectiveness. Regular practice with contrast techniques builds your ability to identify and articulate meaningful differences between options. Creating option sheets for upcoming proposals forces you to think through comparisons systematically rather than hoping they'll emerge naturally during conversation. 2-minute verbal contrast practice with colleagues builds fluency and reveals which comparison points resonate most effectively. Self-auditing your contrast effectiveness provides valuable feedback for improvement. When you present comparisons, do people ask clarifying questions that suggest they're engaging with the differences? Do they reference the comparison points when making their decisions? Do they choose your preferred option more often when you use contrast versus when you don't? This data helps you refine your technique and identify the most compelling comparison dimensions for different audiences. The compound effect of mastering contrast extends beyond individual decisions. When you consistently help people see choices clearly, you develop a reputation as someone who simplifies complex decisions and provides valuable perspective. People begin seeking your input not just for your expertise, but for your ability to illuminate the decision landscape in ways that make the best path forward obvious. Perhaps most importantly, contrast mastery changes how you think about presenting ideas and proposals. Instead of focusing solely on your option's benefits, you begin considering the full choice architecture that surrounds every decision. You stop hoping people will recognize value and start ensuring they can see it clearly through strategic comparison. The transformation from feature-focused presenter to choice architect represents a fundamental shift in your influence approach. You stop trying to convince people that your option is good and start helping them see why it's better. This shift feels more collaborative and respectful, while being significantly more effective at guiding decisions. Yet even the most compelling contrast can fail to create lasting change if people don't feel confident about moving forward together. The final element in conversational mastery involves a sophisticated technique that transforms tentative interest into solid commitment while ensuring everyone feels heard, respected, and excited about the path ahead. This approach doesn't just close conversations, it opens the door to successful implementation and long-term partnership. Chapter 9. Close cleanly. What separates conversations that create lasting change from those that dissolve into forgotten good intentions? The difference isn't in the quality of ideas discussed or the enthusiasm generated during the exchange. It's in what happens in the final moments when the conversation transitions from dialogue to action. Most people end conversations with vague pleasantries and hopeful assumptions, never realizing they're squandering the very moment when commitment crystallizes into reality. Master this critical transition, and you'll transform every meaningful conversation into a launching pad for concrete results. The psychology of conversation endings reveals why so many promising discussions fail to generate follow-through. As conversations wind down, people's attention naturally shifts from the content being discussed to their next obligation or priority. This mental transition creates what researchers call commitment fade, the gradual weakening of intentions formed during the conversation. Without deliberate intervention, even the strongest agreements become fuzzy memories within hours. The solution lies in understanding that closing isn't something that happens to conversations. It's something you actively create. Effective closers don't hope for clarity and commitment. They engineer it through specific techniques that cement understanding and lock in next steps before the conversation ends. This isn't about high-pressure tactics or manipulative urgency. It's about creating the conditions for mutual success and accountability. The foundation of clean closing rests on a counterintuitive principle. The most powerful way to end a conversation is to summarize it collaboratively. Rather than simply stating what you think was decided, you co-create a shared understanding with the other person, ensuring that both parties leave with identical mental models of what happened and what comes next. This collaborative approach transforms potential misunderstandings into explicit agreements while making the other person feel heard and respected throughout the process. Cornell management research demonstrates the power of this approach. Teams using collaborative summaries completed projects approximately 14 days sooner, with 27% fewer clarification messages than teams that relied on individual note-taking and assumptions. The shared recap eliminated the confusion and rework that typically plague project execution, creating clarity that accelerated rather than delayed progress. Collaborative summaries follow a simple three-point structure that ensures nothing important gets lost in translation. The what component captures the key decisions, agreements, or insights that emerged during the conversation. The why element reinforces the reasoning and benefits that motivated those decisions. The next section specifies concrete actions, timelines, and responsibilities that will move things forward. This structure provides comprehensive coverage while remaining simple enough to execute consistently. The magic happens in how you deliver this summary. Instead of lecturing about what was decided, you invite participation. Let me make sure I captured this correctly. We agreed that the priority is improving response time because it directly impacts customer satisfaction, and our next step is for you to gather the current metrics while I research solution options. Does that match your understanding? This approach transforms the summary from a monologue into a dialogue, creating opportunities for correction and confirmation. Getting verbal confirmation or written acknowledgement of your summary creates what psychologists call a social contract, a mutual recognition of shared commitments that increases follow-through rates significantly. When people explicitly agree to a summary, they're not just acknowledging information, they're accepting accountability for their role in making it happen. This psychological shift from passive listener to active participant dramatically increases the likelihood of execution. But even perfect summaries can fail if the commitments feel overwhelming or abstract. This is where micro-commitment stacking transforms good intentions into reliable action. Instead of asking for one large commitment that might trigger resistance or procrastination, you guide people through a series of small agreements that build momentum toward the larger goal. Each yes makes the next yes easier, creating a psychological escalation that feels natural rather than manipulative. Baylor University research on commitment sequencing reveals the power of this approach. Stacked microagreements lifted overall deal completion by 24% compared to single-ask approaches. The technique works because small commitments feel safe and manageable, reducing the psychological barriers that often prevent people from moving forward. Once someone has agreed to several small steps, the larger commitment feels like a logical continuation rather than a dramatic leap. The yes chain begins with the easiest possible agreement, something so simple that refusing would seem unreasonable. Can we agree that improving efficiency would benefit everyone involved? Establishes the foundation. The next level introduces slightly more specific commitment. Would it make sense to explore options that could deliver those efficiency gains? The final level secures concrete action. Should we schedule 30 minutes next week to review the 3 approaches I'll research? Each step in the chain builds on the previous agreement while gradually increasing the level of commitment required. The progression feels natural because each new request logically follows from what they've already accepted. By the time you reach the meaningful commitment, they've already mentally committed to the underlying logic and direction. Timing affects the power of both summaries and micro-commitments significantly. The optimal moment for closing comes when energy and agreement are high, but before fatigue or competing priorities intrude. This sweet spot typically occurs after you've addressed their main concerns and highlighted key benefits, but before the conversation drags on too long. Reading these moments accurately and acting decisively separates effective closers from those who let opportunities slip away. Delivery channels matter more than most people realize. Verbal recaps create immediate clarity and allow for real-time correction, but they can fade from memory quickly. Follow-up emails within 15 minutes cement the verbal agreement while demonstrating professionalism and attention to detail. The combination of immediate verbal confirmation and prompt written follow-up maximizes both clarity and accountability. The language you use in follow-up communications reinforces the collaborative tone established during the conversation. As we discussed, feels more partnership-oriented than as I explained. Our next steps creates shared ownership compared to your action items. These subtle word choices maintain the spirit of collaboration while providing clear documentation of agreements. However, closing techniques can backfire when misapplied. Summary drift, adding new agenda items or commitments during the recap, violates the collaborative spirit and can trigger resistance. The summary should reflect what was actually discussed and agreed upon, not what you wish had been decided. If new items emerge during the recap, acknowledge them as separate topics for future discussion rather than trying to incorporate them retroactively. Commitments that feel transactional rather than collaborative create compliance without enthusiasm. When micro-commitments are stacked too aggressively or without genuine connection to the person's interests, they feel manipulative rather than helpful. The key is ensuring that each step serves their objectives as well as yours, maintaining the mutual benefit that makes collaboration sustainable. Some conversations don't lend themselves to immediate commitment, and forcing closure can damage relationships and future opportunities. When someone needs time to consider options or consult with others, respect that need while still creating structure for follow-up. What time frame would work for you to think this through? Maintains momentum without applying inappropriate pressure. Regular practice with closing techniques builds confidence and fluency that translates into better real-world results. Creating 3-point recap templates for different types of conversations provides structure while maintaining flexibility. Designing yes chains for common scenarios helps you recognize stacking opportunities as they emerge naturally during discussions. Weekly close audits, tracking agreements versus actual follow-through rates, provide valuable feedback about your closing effectiveness. When agreements consistently lead to action, you know your technique is working. When follow-through rates are low, you can examine whether your summaries were clear, your commitments were realistic, or your timing was appropriate. The compound effect of mastering clean closes extends far beyond individual conversations. When people consistently experience clear, respectful, and productive endings to discussions with you, they begin to trust your ability to facilitate meaningful dialogue. They seek you out for important conversations because they know you'll help create clarity and momentum rather than leaving things hanging in ambiguity. Perhaps most importantly, clean closing changes how you approach every conversation from the very beginning. When you know you'll need to summarize and secure commitments at the end, you listen more carefully throughout the discussion. You track agreements as they emerge, identify commitment opportunities as they arise, and guide the conversation toward actionable conclusions rather than abstract discussions. The transformation from conversation participant to conversation architect represents the ultimate evolution in your communication mastery. You stop hoping conversations will end well and start ensuring they create the clarity and momentum needed for real-world results. This shift not only improves your success rate, but also enhances your reputation as someone who makes things happen rather than just talking about them. But here's the most profound realization that comes from mastering all 9 frameworks. Conversation control isn't really about controlling conversations at all. It's about creating the conditions where genuine collaboration flourishes, where mutual understanding deepens, and where both parties leave feeling heard, respected, and energized about moving forward together. When you've truly mastered these skills, people don't feel controlled. They feel supported, guided, and empowered to achieve outcomes they genuinely want. The frameworks you've learned, from locking clear end goals to closing with collaborative commitment, work together as an integrated system that transforms you from a passive participant in conversations into an active architect of meaningful dialogue. You now possess the ability to walk into any interaction with confidence, knowing you can guide it toward productive outcomes while strengthening rather than straining relationships. This is the ultimate payoff of conversational mastery, the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you can handle any dialogue, the deep satisfaction of consistently creating value for others while achieving your own objectives, and the compound benefits of a reputation built on making every conversation count. You've moved beyond hoping for good outcomes to ensuring them, beyond reacting to circumstances to creating them, beyond being at the mercy of conversational chaos to becoming its master. The conversations that await you now are not obstacles to navigate, but opportunities to create value, build relationships, and achieve outcomes that matter. Every interaction becomes a chance to practice your craft, refine your skills, and demonstrate the quiet leadership that comes from true conversational mastery. The frameworks are yours. Now go use them to transform not just your conversations, but your entire approach to human connection and influence. Yet mastering the frameworks of conversation control reveals an even more fundamental challenge. The split-second moments before you speak, when your mind must rapidly organize thoughts into coherent, compelling responses. Most people stumble in these crucial microseconds, watching perfect opportunities slip away because they couldn't think fast enough to seize them. There's a hidden skill that separates those who consistently say the right thing at the right time from those who think of brilliant responses hours later. The complete solution to transforming your rapid-fire thinking into articulate, confident communication is revealed in the audiobook Speak Like a Genius: How to Think Fast Before You Speak. Tap the center of the video now to continue your transformation journey.